Hi everyone, this is Krinza, and today we have with us the Chief of DeFi, the Head of DeFi Architect, Philippe. And in this episode, we'll be talking about the Internet of Money that is being built with blockchain technology and, of course, without banks. In other words, we are going to be talking about all things DeFi, that's decentralized finance. And at this point, I just want to take this opportunity, Philippe, to really ask you, what do you think, like in your words, how do you define DeFi and how does it impact the traditional finance that we have?
Yeah, sure. So decentralized finance is, I think, much more than just decentralizing it. It's also about bringing much more financial transparency about the processes. And if you look at recent episodes that we saw in DeFi with what happened to Celsius, you can realize that all these companies that offer easy ways to earn yield, right? Ultimately, you want to get those yields. You don't really understand how they give you those yields. And the thing is that if the process in the background is not fully automated, it's also difficult to give a real-time transparency to the process. So imagine that those companies had the possibility to build those strategies in a fully automated way. If it will have been fully automated, it also means that it will have been fully transparent, right? And that's ultimately much better for investor protection to give that kind of transparency. It also means that you don't need to have auditing firms as well to check those companies, because it's fully on chain and fully transparent. So it's that ledger that is the blockchain also removes that necessity. And I will say also in terms of costs, it makes it much more financially efficient to operate that kind of complex financial applications. It's cheaper to do it in DeFi than doing it with traditional banks. So I will say that's the three things that it provides is obviously decentralization and new yield opportunities to parts of finance that usually people do not have access to, like being an earning fees from trading fees, for example, is something that you cannot really get in traditional finance. The second part is a decrease of operational costs, and the third part is much more transparency.
Yeah, so you went over to like some of the benefits that DeFi offers, right? What are some of the biggest problems that might be challenging the DeFi space?
So yeah, obviously scalability is an issue. I think there is also an issue about the concentration of some token holders that own the governance token of these platforms. There is obviously some challenges about who owns the keys of the smart contracts of those platforms. So there is sometimes some key ceremonies, and it's notable people in the DeFi space that tend to be, take they tend to take the responsibility for that, but also because they're getting also most of the benefits by being builders. So there is obviously still some concerns about that, because you not always know who is actually behind those protocols, which is sometimes done on purpose. But in terms of scalability, uh, it is with what we see with the merge, it is obviously a step towards the right direction. I will say that the multiplication of blockchains as well is basically spreading out the DeFi users among different chains instead of making them all stay within Ethereum, which also in itself helps for the scalability. And I will say that there is another part that's a challenge that is surging, which is permissionless DeFi and permission DeFi. If you look at our traditional finance ecosystem, it's permission, right? When you trade the stock, bonds, funds, and so on and so forth, it's a closed financial system, right? You need to have some sort of KYC to access that market through your bank. And this is something that for obviously many DeFi users do not, want DeFi to be permissionless. I personally believe that there is space for everyone, and it is very likely going to happen, that there will be spaces within DeFi that are permission, and then other spaces in DeFi that are permissionless. And I think if we really want to see more adoption from bigger players, that's going to be a necessity to offer that kind of places within DeFi where they can feel more safe in terms of KYC, AML, regulatory restrictions, and so on. And that does not mean that DeFi is dead, right? Permissionless DeFi is still going to be valid. And I think that will be beneficial for the ecosystem if we figure out how to enable that in a safe way.
Also, when we talk about DeFi, we hear a lot of terms just being thrown around a lot, right? One of it being liquid staking. So, what exactly is liquid staking and why is it important?
Yeah, sure. So liquid staking is important because the biggest source of crypto yield actually comes from proof of stake blockchains. And to access that yield from proof of stake, either you need to be a validator or you need to be a delegate staker. And when you do one of these two, the thing is that it's not interacting with DeFi. So basically, liquid staking allows you to access those rewards, but at the same time receive a token that represents your staked tokens. And that token is going to be then reusable within DeFi. So you can borrow against it, you can provide liquidity to reduce the liquidity risk of liquid staking. So that part is quite important because without liquid staking, DeFi cannot access the biggest source of crypto yield, which is proof of stake. So that part is quite important to understand. And the journey of liquid staking obviously does not just stop here. I personally think that the challenge from now on is going to be convincing and explaining to other builders how they can build on top of liquid staking to basically use that yield and basically repackage that yield into other innovative products that they can come up with. And that's going to then shift the narrative of liquid staking being first something that helps the liquidity of staked Ethereum, which was the initial purpose of it, because we cannot unstake Ethereum for now. The second narrative has been with other chains that, we're enabling DeFi composability, and we're basically connecting the staking rewards from proof of stake to DeFi, and that's cool and that's great, and it enables composability. And now the new part, I think, is really to consider liquid staking not as a DeFi gen product where we can boost rewards with farming rewards from plenty of different ways, but it's more about, okay, how can I use that as an infrastructure itself that I can build on top that's going to give me a competitive hedge over my competitors that are not using that's like base stream of liquid staking rewards, right? So that's, I think, the evolution that we're going through. And that's one of the biggest advantages of liquid staking is really to see that innovation happening, which also means that then you can have custom strategies. And if you're building a product that needs to generate some yield, for example, you can not only use liquid staking, you can use lending interest, you can use other type of yields and package it in a way that is going to make it more in line with your personal risk profile. And that's very important, liquid staking in that piece specifically, because without liquid staking, you cannot really easily compose those yield strategies with other yield strategies from DeFi if you're not bringing staking rewards and proof of stake rewards into like something accessible in DeFi.
Yeah. Also, like you talked about liquid staking, you talked about yields, right? What are the yield alternatives to liquid staking? Are there any other options or ways that developers or even builders or even Web3 infrastructure companies can explore?
Yeah, sure. So I will say that there is currently three big categories of yields in DeFi. So the first one, I mean, from our perspective, obviously being liquid staking. The second one is lending interest from peer-to-peer lending platforms such as Aave, Compound, Venus, and so on. The third stream of yield is the trading fees from DEXs, right? So you provide liquidity to a decentralized exchange, and in exchange you're going to receive the trading fees. So here the challenge is obviously that depending on the tokens that you have in the pool, they might have so-called impermanent loss, but this is something that not can be bigger or much smaller. So if you use stable coins or liquid staking, in general it will tend to be very, very small impermanent loss, and that's obviously a different stream of yield to be earning the trading fees. And then there is also everything related to cross-chain. So there is currently some um, basically bridge liquidity pools, if I can call it that way, where you deposit your stable coins and some tokens into those pools, and it's going to be used for people that want to make cross-chain transfers, and they want to make cross-chain transfers very fast. They don't want to wait 20 minutes. They want to get the money within seconds. And we can basically, the trick here to enable cross-chain transfers within seconds is just because you already have money on the other side, right? So it's like, I want to send money from Europe to China. How can I do it in a few seconds? Well, you can if you already have someone that has money in China, and will just make the transfer there very quickly. So that's basically a trick that also already happens in traditional finance, and those pools allow, let's say, these people that can basically replace an intermediary bank to some extent, to provide that liquidity, and basically earn those cross-chain transfer fees as a yield. So that's basically, I will say, the four main pillars currently of the base layers of DeFi yield that you currently can get. Everything what brings on top is just the result of DeFi composability, so you can leverage those yields and so on and so forth. But yeah.
So you have been with this team and building this DeFi infrastructure. How is Ankr bringing the benefits of DeFi to the masses? What are some of the offered solution that we have?
Yeah, so I will say we Ankr is mostly a platform that offers tools for developers. So with the RPC node network that we have, I think what is amazing is DeFi is permissionless, and users are not necessarily based in the US, in Europe, or in China. They're really in all over the place. And what currently happens with the infrastructure side is that users that are located in remote locations, like in Australia or South Africa, they might end up having much higher latency and having a poor DeFi experience when compared to people based in the US. So with Ankr, we have that network of RPC nodes, which is one of the most diverse networks of nodes that we have, and that makes the latency going being very low. Liquid staking is obviously unlocking all those proof of stake rewards to let builders and people in DeFi to use reuse the value of stake tokens and their yield stream into DeFi. And it is then their job, and we hope to really build innovative products on top of it. And if you think about it, it's a little bit like the reference rate for these crypto economies, such as Ethereum, Avalanche, Polygon, BNB, and so on, which is, that in every single country you have a central bank that gives you a reference rate. And if you're not earning that yield that the central bank is saying is the reference rate, you know that you're doing something that is financially not very efficient. But obviously, it is not always very easy to get that yield that the Chinese central bank is saying you're supposed to get. There is banks in between. Maybe the banks will charge you a higher rate. Funnily enough, sometimes they charge you a smaller rate than the central bank. Like in Russia a few years ago, I remember it was the case. So in DeFi, there is that technical difficulty, which is delegate staking or being a validator. So liquid staking really allows you to access that reference rate in the easiest possible way, which is just making it as easy as a swap, right? It should be a one-click experience, and that's what we're trying to offer at Ankr.